Hi everyone, this is Attorney Lilian with Lily Legal. We are an immigration law firm and we help our clients get green cards for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So today I want to talk to you all about the citizenship interview process, what to expect the second you walk in and see the officer to when you leave the interview and after the interview. So we will go through that process today. And as always, if you have any questions about this or anything else, you can always book a time to speak with me by going to my website, lilylegal.com/contact us, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. So I wanted to do this topic because I recently had a client go through the citizenship interview process and they were so nervous. Hi, Favor. Thanks for watching. They were so nervous about the whole process. They didn't know how the officer will perceive them because their English wasn't that good. They did not, they were just nervous about everything from beginning to end, even though we went through the whole process of preparing them and just letting them know what to expect. They were obviously still nervous because getting your citizenship in the US is such a big deal and it's basically the last step in the whole immigration process. So it is a serious, you should take it seriously. And I do understand the nerves that come with that. So I want to do this live to basically help you if you have those nerves, right? If you are going through your own citizenship process and you are nervous, watch this video, take it in. This is basically what you can expect on the day of your interview. So of course, before your interview, you should prepare. You should be prepared to go through your interview process, the English reading, writing, and speaking, the civics, and be prepared to go through your application. Hi, Augustine from Liberia. Thank you for watching. Feel free to tell me where you're watching from and say hi in the comments and ask questions. As I'm going through this, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them. And if you're watching this on the replay, welcome. You can also ask me questions in the comments. I do go back and respond to those. So be sure to do that. Don't sit there with your question going unanswered, okay? So the first thing you need to know is that, of course, you're going to get an interview notice. So after you file your citizenship application, you're going to get your interview notice. You should read your interview notice because it basically tells you what type of documents the officer expects you to bring with you, depending on how you're getting your citizenship. So if you're getting your citizenship through your marriage, meaning you're applying for citizenship within 3 years of getting your green card, the officer is going to want more documents having to do with your marriage than if you were applying 5 years after getting your green card. So it is so important that you pay attention to that and make sure that you are reading the instructions, you are reading the notice. So obviously for my clients, I do this for them. I make sure they know exactly what documents they need to bring to the interview. I give them a list and they bring those to the interview, okay? So when you get your notice, read the notice, put the date and time of your interview on your calendar, okay? I've had people forget. I do reminders for my clients, and I've had people that we call like a couple days before the interview, and they're like, oh, wow, I completely forgot. I thought it was next week. Thank you for reminding me. So make sure you put it on your calendar with reminders, okay? Put it on your calendar with reminders so that you are reminded that you have an interview coming up. And of course, study for the civics test. If your English is not that good, go ahead and do the ESL classes, all those things, right? You want to make sure that you are studying for the interview. You are studying for the test. There are different resources. If you are a visual learner, there's flashcards, there's videos. There are also apps. So USCIS actually has an app for the citizenship test where you can go through and answer the civics questions, randomly generated civics questions. So study. There's many ways for you to do it. Find the one that works best for you and do it, okay? And study. So you get your notice. The next thing, you go to your interview. On the day, show up at least 15 minutes before your interview time. You check in. You need your interview notice. Like if you read the notice, it says to bring the notice with you. You need that. The front desk person will take your notice, scan it, check you in so that the officers know that you're there and ready for your interview. You sit in the waiting room and wait to be called. The officer comes out, calls your name, and you go into the office. The second you walk into the officer gets behind your desk and they will tell you to continue standing. Raise your right hand, and they're going to give you an oath that basically says you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Of course, you are there to tell the truth and get your citizenship. So you say yes, you sit down, and then the officer will explain to you how the interview will go, right? Most interviews, actually 99% of the citizenship interviews that I have attended with my clients have taken these forms. You walk in, you swear that you're going to tell the truth, you sit down. The first thing the officer does is the reading test, okay? The reading test. So they have an iPad right there that the words will come up on. You read what comes up on the iPad, right? You read what comes up on the iPad, and then the officer will then give you the writing part. So typically, the reading and writing parts play off of each other. So for example, if the officer says, if what you read says what is the capital of the United States? Right? If that is the question that you read out loud, then the officer will give you what to write. The officer will say, write that the capital of the United States is in Washington, D.C. And you will write that on the screen. So again, to prepare, be comfortable with a tablet. You have to be comfortable writing on a tablet, reading from a tablet, using either your finger to write it or using a stylus to write. The officer will provide the stylus, and of course, you provide your finger. So you go ahead and write that on the screen. The officer will take a look at it. If they feel that it passes, they will tell you it passes, and then you move on to the next test, which is the civics. The civics test is the history test. And this is where people have the most problems, especially if they do not go through the process of studying. Okay, if you do not study, it's going to be more difficult for you. All right, so remember, they'll do the reading and writing and then the civics. If you pass the civics, it moves on to the next stage. Now, if you know before your interview that you're not going to pass the English and you're most likely not going to do great on the civics, you should be telling your lawyer that. Okay, you should be telling your lawyer that, because there are exceptions. There are ways that you can skip. Sorry, y'all, my child is not having a great time today. But there are ways that you can skip the English part, okay? You can skip the reading and writing if you meet certain exemptions. So if you have been a U.S. Resident So if you've had your green card for, let's say there's the 50-20 rule, the 55-15 rule, and then there's the 65-20 rule. So the 65-20 is the best one because that basically means if you're 65 years old or older and you've had your green card for 20 years, you can skip the reading and writing, and you can bring an interpreter with you to the interview. That's the best possible option. And then for the civics part, they give you 20 questions that they can pull from. So everyone else has to study 100 questions. You, as someone that's 65 and older and has had your green card for 20 years, only has to study 20 questions. So that is an amazing benefit that comes with the length of time you have been a green card holder and your age, okay? And then, of course, the 55-15 and the 50-20 rule basically says basically with that, you get to skip the English part of the test, but you still have to do the civics. It applies to you just like everyone else, okay? So just keep that in mind as you're going through the citizenship process, is that everything still applies to you, even if you have been a citizen, even if you've had your green card for so many years. Okay, y'all, give me 1 minute. Someone is cranky pants right now. 1 minute, y'all. It's okay. So, hi, Michael. Welcome. So Michael is asking, can he bring a copy of his application with him and review it with the officer? No, you cannot. So the officer already has a copy of your citizenship application. They do not want you to bring your own copy because they're going to ask you the questions and they expect you to know the answers, okay? So, for example, the question about where you've lived for the past 5 years, the officer expects you to be able to tell them that without needing any sort of visual aid, without needing your own application. In some situations, the officer might just be like, oh, so you lived at this address from this time to this time, and you'll just have to say yes or no. Or, for example, are you married? What's the name of your spouse? And all those things. If you do not know that information off the top of your head, I would say go ahead, review your application before you get there, because you will not be able to refer to any of your application documents during your interview. The officer expects you to know the information on your application, okay? So after your civics test, if you pass, you move on to the application stage, which is what Michael was talking about. Now, like I said, whatever you're filing with USCIS, you should be reviewing before you get in there for your interview, okay? So you have your application, the officer has it, he has everything you submitted with your application. The officer also has every immigration application that you have ever filed, okay? In your file, the officer has every single immigration application that you have ever filed or that has ever been filed for you. And they're going to review that before they call you in for your interview. And you have to be ready in case something from your immigration history comes up and the officer wants to ask you about it. So for example, if you got your green card through marriage, you should be prepared for the officer to ask you about that marriage, especially if you are no longer with that spouse, right? If you are no longer living with your spouse, if you are no longer married to that spouse, you should be ready to be asked questions about the spouse that you got your green card through. So what type of questions should you expect? What's their name? What's their age, what's their date of birth, basic information about them. Where do they live? Where did you two last live together? And the officer expects you to know this information because they were your spouse and you got your green card through them. Now, if the officer is asking you, where did you and your spouse last live together? And according to the forms, it's Alaska, and you said it's California, just know the officer is going to then assume that there's an issue or that your marriage was not real, and will dig deeper, okay? And will start asking you more detailed questions about your spouse, minute details that were in your previous applications, to try to basically catch you in a lie. Like I tell everyone, the USCIS officer is not your friend. They're not there to make this process easy for you. They're there to find a reason to deny your application. So don't give them one. Okay, so if you got your green card through marriage, be prepared to answer a lot of questions about that marriage. All right, so that's the first thing you need to keep in mind. If you have children that do not live with you, be prepared to answer questions about child support and how you are providing support for your child. So even if there is no court order saying that you have to pay child support, US government still expects you to be providing some form of support for your children and to be able to document that. So for my clients that have children that do not live with them, we already know this is coming, and we bring that documentation with us to the interview so that there will be nothing that will stop the officer from approving the citizenship right there. The next thing that can affect your process while the officer is going through your application with you is if you have unpaid taxes. Okay, you filed your tax return, you owe taxes, or you haven't filed taxes since you became a green card holder. That's a no-no, especially if you are required to file taxes. If you are not required to file taxes, what I typically do for my clients is get a letter from an accountant or a tax attorney saying that you are not required to file taxes, either because of your income or your status. Okay, there has to be a legal reason why you are not required to file a tax return for the officer to basically say, okay, we can move past this. Okay, as far if you do owe back taxes, what you need to know. If you owe back taxes, you need to be making some form of payment. You need to have a payment plan with the government. You need to be paying, either paid it off or in the process of paying it off with a payment plan. Okay? You can ask for a payment plan from the IRS. You need documentation of that payment plan for the IRS, for the USCIS officer to believe you, right? So all of this, the child support, the taxes, if you owe it, make sure you're paying it, or you have some form of payment plan in place and that you have documentation of that payment plan, okay? So the last thing that can derail your application while the office is going through the actual application portion of the interview is if you have any criminal records or open criminal charges, okay? One thing to keep in mind is if you have an open criminal charge, the officer cannot approve your citizenship if you have an open criminal charge. So let's say you were arrested and you have a case, let's say assault and battery charge that's still going through the courts, and you decide a month after the charges were filed to file for citizenship, you should not do that unless you know for sure that before your citizenship interview that the court case will be resolved in your favor. So not only does the court case resolve, right? Not only does it end, it needs to end in your favor for the officer to actually be able to still approve your case. So if you have an open criminal charge, the officer is not going to approve it, especially on the day of the interview. However, the officer will most likely send you a notice of intent to deny your case. And if within the time frame that's given for you to respond to that, your charge is dismissed or resolved in your favor in a way that does not have any immigration consequences, the officer will be able to grant you if it's in their discretion. So when it comes to good moral character, which is where the criminal charges come in, it's the officer's discretion whether they think being charged alone within the 5 years of you applying for your citizenship would affect that. Okay, so it's really important that you pay attention to your criminal record. And if you do have any criminal charges, criminal convictions, even if it was dismissed, and I say this with all respect to criminal attorneys, sometimes a case that is not an issue in criminal court for state purposes can still affect your immigration. So in Massachusetts, we have something called continuance without a finding. But in order for you to get a continuance without a finding, you need to either have a guilty plea or admit some sufficient facts that would still find you guilty, right? For immigration purposes, that is being convicted. For, for your background checks and all of that, for work, those are not considered a conviction. But for immigration, a continuance without a finding is a conviction. But some criminal attorneys that do not know that will assume that it wouldn't have an effect because on the state level, it does not have an effect. So it is really important that if you do have criminal charges, that you are paying attention to it. You are talking to an immigration lawyer before even filing, because you want to make sure that if there's something you need to do to clean it up before you file, that you're doing those things, okay? So the officer goes over your application, goes through these 4 things if they are an issue in your case, and then the officer will tell you 1 or 2 things, right? It's either they tell you, oh, we've reviewed the application, we're going to recommend approval, and you're going to get your swearing in, your oath ceremony notice in the mail. Or they're going to tell you that you should expect something in the mail from them, that they're going to review it, you should expect something in the mail from them. When they tell you that, 9 times out of 10, they're going to send you a notice of intent to deny or a request for evidence. So for example, if you went in there and you had, you had children that do not live with you, and the officer says they want evidence that you are supporting your children, they'll most likely send you a notice of intent to deny with the requested information, or they may send you a request for evidence for those documents, and then you just have to produce that, okay? So it is really important that you pay attention to what the officer says and have the right expectations. So just because the officer says to expect something in the mail, or that they may request something from you, does not mean they're not going to approve your case. It just means you may need to present more documents. You may need to prove more things to them, but it is not the end, okay? The interview is not the end unless they approve you and you're now waiting for your oath to be sworn in. But you should know the interview is 9 times out of 10 not the end if the officer does not approve your case right away, okay? So do not get nervous if the officer says to expect something in the mail. It just means you're gonna get another chance to convince the officer to approve your case, okay? So keep that in mind. Nervousness happens, but know that you still have a shot. And then once the officer tells you that, they conclude the interview and walk you out to the waiting room and you can go home and wait for either the old ceremony notice or the notice of intent to deny or request for evidence and respond to that. So that is basically what to expect at your citizenship interview. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I am happy to respond to those. But yeah, I'm just going to quickly go over the process again. You go into the office, you're sworn in to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. You do the reading test, the writing test, the civics test, and then the officer goes over your application and the 4 things that can derail your application during the interview is if you got your green card through a prior marriage and you can't answer questions about that marriage, you have children and you're not supporting the children, or you don't have documentation to show that you're supporting the children, you have unpaid taxes and you don't have any documentation showing that you have some form of payment plan with the IRS to pay off those taxes, and that you have a criminal record or open criminal charge that the officer can look at to determine your good moral character. So, and then after that, the officer will let you know whether they're going to approve it or if they need more information before they can go ahead and approve it. And that will end your interview. You go home and wait for the notice. Do not freak out if it takes time for the notice to come. It is coming, okay? So that is all I have for you today. As always, if you have any questions, go ahead, put them in the comments. If you want to schedule a time to meet with me and ask me your questions one-on-one, go ahead and do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com/contact us, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you for your time. And remember, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you know someone that needs to hear this, please share the video with them. And if you are listening in a place that you can subscribe and you don't want to miss anything, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And once again, I am Lilian Chukura. I am the owner of Lily Legal, where we do immigration law and we do it well. Bye for now.